You smell smoke in your apartment. Building at 2 a.m. Your first move without even thinking is your phone. 3 numbers. Sirens within minutes. A truck, train crews. Water pressure calculated down to the pound per square inch. That safety net feels so automatic that we forget it's actually brand new. In the full span of human history, organized firefighting is a toddler. For thousands of years, when a city caught fire, there was no one coming. No trucks, no hoses. Number 911. So what did people do when their entire world was made of wood? Straw and oil lamps, and a single spark could erase a city in a night? Here's the part that sounds made up. In ancient Rome, one of the richest men who ever lived built his fortune by watching buildings burn and refusing to put the fire out until the owner sold him the property, cheap, while it was still on fire. That man became one of the wealthiest people in the ancient world. Not from conquest, not from trade, from fire. So who actually put fires out before firefighters existed? And how did watching people suffer through fire eventually turn into the profession that now runs toward burning buildings to save strangers for free? By the end of this, you'll see that firefighting wasn't invented by a genius with a good idea. It was forced into existence through greed, through catastrophe, through cities that burned so badly that survival demanded a new kind of citizen, one who runs in instead of away. A private fire squad in Rome, standing outside a burning house, negotiating a price. A bell tolling through a sleeping medieval town, calling every able body outside. A baker in London waking up to find his own oven has doomed 10,000 homes. A young printer in Philadelphia, forming a club that would quietly rewrite how the world fights fire forever. 4 cities, 4 centuries, 1 unanswered emergency. Rome, 1st century BC. The city is packed with insulate, cheap, densely stacked wooden apartment blocks, lit by open flame, heated by open flame, and built by landlords who cut every possible corner. Fires were not occasional, they were routine. There was no city fire department, so Crassus built his own, a private crew of around 500 men. But here's the twist. When they arrived at a burning building, they didn't start pumping water. They started negotiating. Crassus would offer to buy the burning property and the neighboring properties it threatened for a fraction of their worth. Only after the owner signed did his men lift a finger. The first fire brigade in Roman history wasn't built to save lives. It was built to harvest desperation. Eventually, the Emperor Augustus had seen enough. After further devastating fires tore through the city, he created the vigiles, night watchmen who patrolled Rome, part police, part firefighters, funded by the state instead of a private buyer's wallet. It was one of the first tax-funded emergency services in history, born directly out of one man's fire-fueled greed. Rome didn't invent firefighting out of kindness. It invented firefighting to stop being extorted by fire. But Rome fell, and with it, that public safety idea nearly vanished for 1,000 years. So, what happened when the empire that invented city-funded firefighters disappeared and Europe was left with wooden towns and no plan at all? Medieval European towns were fire traps by design. Thatched roofs, timber frames, houses built close enough to pass a loaf of bread window to window. A single blown-over candle could take out a whole street before dawn. The solution wasn't a department. It was a law and a bell. Many towns enforced a couvre-feu, literally, cover the fire, a curfew requiring households to smother their hearths at a set hour each night. That's where the English word curfew comes from. The earliest fire prevention system in Europe wasn't equipment. It was a bedtime enforced on an entire town, because one careless household could kill everyone else's. When fire did break out, a watchman on a tower or church spire rang the bell, and the response was the whole town. Every able-bodied person expected to grab a leather bucket and form a human chain to the nearest well or river. No trucks, no hoses, no training, just neighbors passing water hand to hand, racing gravity and wind. Before there were firefighters, the entire town was the fire department, whether they'd volunteered for the job or not. That system worked, barely, for small fires, but it had never been tested against a firestorm that could swallow an entire capital city in 4 days. In 1666, it would be September 2nd, 1666. A baker named Thomas Fariner goes to bed in Pudding Lane, London, believing he's banked his oven fire properly. He hasn't. Sometime after midnight, embers catch the wood-framed bakery, and the fire slips into the street. London's medieval firefighting was still the old bucket chain system, completely unprepared for a city where wooden houses leaned so close their upper floors nearly touched across the street. The Lord Mayor, woken and told of the blaze, reportedly dismissed it, saying a woman could piss it out. He was catastrophically wrong. The fire didn't spread because London lacked buckets. It spread because London lacked authority. Nobody had the power to legally order buildings torn down fast enough to stop the fire's path. And by the time officials acted, it was already unstoppable. The fire burned for 4 days. It destroyed over 13,000 houses and dozens of churches, including Old St. Paul's Cathedral. The eventual weapon that finally slowed it wasn't water, it was gunpowder and demolition. Crews blowing up buildings ahead of the flames to starve the fire of fuel. London didn't lose its fire department. London lost it because it never had one. Worth the name only borrowed buckets and much hesitation. The Great Fire of London should have created firefighters instantly. It didn't. What it created instead was something stranger. An industry that would accidentally invent the fire brigade as a side effect of protecting money. After the fire, a property developer named Nicholas Barbon saw an opportunity nobody else had. He created one of the first fire insurance companies in England. But insurance alone didn't stop fires. It only paid for the damage after. So Barbon and the insurers who followed him took the next step. They built their own private fire brigades, staffed and paid for, to protect the buildings they'd insured. Insured buildings were marked with a metal plaque, a fire mark, bearing the company's symbol. When a fire broke out, brigades would race to the scene, check the building for their company's mark, and only then fight the fire. For decades, if your house was burning and the wrong company's brigade arrived first, they might genuinely walk away and let it burn, because putting it out wasn't their client's problem. Firefighting was reborn, not as a public service, but as a subscription protection sold, not guaranteed to strangers. It took an ocean and a completely different kind of person to turn firefighting from a company perk into something owed to every neighbor, rich or poor. Philadelphia, 1736. Benjamin Franklin, then a young printer, not yet a statesman, had watched the city struggle with exactly the same problem as London and Rome before it. Fires that spread because nobody was organized to stop them together. Franklin didn't wait for the government. He gathered 30 of his fellow citizens and founded the Union Fire Company, a volunteer brigade where members pledged to keep fire buckets and equipment ready and to show up for any fire. Insured or not, rich house or poor house. Franklin's real innovation wasn't the bucket or the ladder. It was the idea that fire response was a shared civic duty owed to every neighbor, not a service sold to whoever could pay. That idea spread to other American cities and generations later became the blueprint for the public fire departments we take for granted today. The modern firefighter wasn't born in a laboratory or a palace. He was born around a printer's kitchen table as a promise between neighbors. So the next time you hear a siren or see a fire truck run a red light with its lights on, remember what had to happen before that was even possible. It took a Roman con man's greed to prove that firefighting couldn't be left to private profit. It took a curfew bell and a bucket chain to prove ordinary people had to be organized, not just willing. It took London burning to the ground to prove that hesitation is its own kind of fuel. It took an insurance plaque to accidentally prove that trained crews save more than they cost. And it took one printer in Philadelphia to prove the whole idea only works if it belongs to everyone, not just the people who can pay for it. That firefighter who shows up for you tonight for free, regardless of who you are, he's not just doing a job. He's the final answer to a question civilizations spent 2,000 years getting wrong before they finally got it right.